Welcome to We Chats, a space for people with diabetes where we bring the experts to you. My name is Will and I'm a diabetes specialist dietitian and co-founder of We Nutrition. And here at We Chats, we love having relaxed and fun conversations combining diabetes research, the experience of people living with diabetes, and the expertise of people working in diabetes. Welcome to this episode where we're chatting about going beyond GLP-1s and getting into the psychology of sustainable weight management with Dr Neesha Patel, who is the founder of Evoking Health Limited and is a health psychologist specialising in the area of GLP-1 therapy. Welcome, Neesha. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Will. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're very, very fortunate to have you. Thank you for sharing your time with us because I know how busy you are. And Neesha, for people that are just meeting you today, would you please be able to share a little bit about how you've come to be in this place, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a UK-based chartered health psychologist, and after qualifying in 2014, I went to work for the NHS, and I was working predominantly in obesity, so weight management, tier three weight management, we call it here in the UK. And I spent many years in tier three service, and then I moved on to another tier three service where I was clinical lead. And I guess throughout that journey, I've worked with patients with diabetes, type 1, type 2, but also those that are, at that time trying to get on board with GLP-1 therapy because, it wasn't widely available as it is now.
Mhm.
So I was working part of a multidisciplinary team, so like dietitians, like yourself, consultants, occupational therapists. There's a wide range of us supporting patients on their journey with GLP-1s. And I guess that's where I really started to learn about GLP-1s and their effectiveness and use in this particular patient population, but also for patients that are trying to lose weight and don't necessarily have diabetes. So yeah, I guess my journey with this particular field started probably a few years even before that when I was doing my PhD in diabetes management. So that is where I originally started to learn about weight management and diabetes, and then went over to the clinical side. Spent many years, and I still work in the NHS, but I also, as you mentioned, have set up my own private practice, Evoking Health, as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. This is what I love about WeChats, the opportunity to connect and have these conversations with people such as yourself who have such vast experience and knowledge. And, WeChats, we sort of place it for people with diabetes, but in this particular topic with GLP-1s, yes, we're talking about people with diabetes, but we're also talking about people that are seeking weight management as well.
Mm.
And quite often we find that they intertwine with each other, weight management and diabetes management. So let's jump into this because I'm super excited for this today. Um, so we're aiming, we're speaking to people who are currently using weight loss injections, or maybe considering about using weight loss injections, or maybe they've got that thought about, well, what happens after weight loss injections? Because I don't know about you, but I find that there's a lot of conversation about beginning, there's not a lot of conversation about the end of weight loss injections. Do you find that in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's people are, by no means of their own fault. It's let's get onto the GLP-1s, but actually, I don't think people are setting maybe even timelines as to how long they're going to stay on them for. But even in, where they are funded, there is often a time limit, and I suppose it's a postcode lottery as to how patients or clients will be supported once that journey ends, because for some people it's not going to be sustainable to stay on them forever. So there will come a time where the GLP-1s, from a biological perspective, will stop doing what they're doing. And then what people are going to find, or are finding, is that everything that they were sort of struggling with before may return, because the medication doesn't change the mindset or the psychology, if you like. It just changes the biology.
Absolutely. I think there's a really important role at the beginning for mapping out the journey and saying, okay, is this a long-term, lifelong medication for a long-term condition, or is this a short-term tool, and what do we put alongside that tool so that any results that come along whilst using that tool are sustained beyond. And yeah, I completely agree. Unfortunately, it's no one's fault here, but that conversation is getting skipped quite a lot at a time. So, you know, what do you see as sort of when people are starting to think about maybe reducing a dose or coming off the medication? You mentioned, or maybe the medication stops working. What are you seeing with people? What are people sharing with you?
One of the main things I think that people are sharing as is around food noise, is that the hunger is returning. But actually that's normal, because what the GLP-1 does is it suppresses that noise. So it turns it off, because it kind of, those intrusive, persistent thoughts about food that were probably there before the person went on to the injections, the medication itself is kind of muting that, if you like. So naturally, when you either start to lower your dose or you come off them, that food noise and that sort of cravings, people come sometimes, describe that they come back like 1,000 times more or louder, if you like, because suddenly, there's that piece of the puzzle that's now missing. So it kind of, people find that their appetite starts to return as it was before, or even more so, as well. So that feeling of fullness, it starts to disappear. And I think that is what's causing a lot of people either anxiety, disappointment, frustration, all those unhelpful emotions and even thoughts around this. Because some people have invested a lot of time and money into the medication, so naturally are going to feel mixed emotions.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you've touched on some really, really important things there that I just want to highlight for any listeners. We've got over a decade worth of research on these medications, and we know that the effects of suppression of food noise, the effects of suppressing appetite and suppressing hunger, they run out eventually. And that's just what happens. And it's really, I think that setting that expectation at the beginning and people knowing about that going into these medications is really important. I feel like, I don't, we've both been working in this area for a good long time, over 10 years. And I remember when I first started working in diabetes, so like 16 years ago, we didn't talk about food noise. It's very much a term that's come up in the past few years. And I think it's a really interesting term because I hear it used in so many ways. It's a very individual term. And I've seen a couple of a couple of people try and capture it and say, this is what food noise is. What do you think about the term food noise?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've heard it a lot more in this sort of GLP-1 setting, if you like, whereas in the more, I guess, standard weight management clinic, it was more about emotional eating. Or even with my private clients, it will be their relationship with food. That was commonly, and it still is used for those that are not on GLP-1 medications. It will be about a relationship with food and emotional eating. And I suppose there is a link, though, between food noise and emotional eating, because emotional eating food noise is driven by that sort of reward function in the brain, that dopamine driven sort of cravings and rewards. So I suppose they kind of are used interchangeably, but the meaning behind them is very similar in that there's this persistent sort of feeling and thoughts around food, if you like, and whether the triggers for that is to do with emotions. Now, when we think about emotions, I always like to think, and I explain them to patients, that they're on a spectrum. It's not always about feeling stressed and anxious and depressed, and that's one end of the scale. But the other end is emotions like boredom, not being stimulated enough. Is where for some people food comes in and does it for them, because the food releases those sort of happy hormones, if you like. So whether you're stressed, anxious, or you're bored, the outcome you're going to get by having certain foods, or I probably even drinks for some people, could be very sort of the similar or the same, if you like, as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we can't get away from food. We majority of people, 99% of people eat and drink. We have to eat and drink, and we use food for celebration. We use food for a biological function. We use it for sort of a soothing function as well. So in relation to maybe an uncomfortable feeling, it's happy, it's stressed, it's joyful, it's sadness, it's all the range of emotions, which I think is quite unique with food, coupled with the fact that we need it to survive. So it can be difficult to step away from it, but I think, when we talk about food noise, the things that stand out for me are noise kind of gives it that sense of discomfort, something that we don't want, and it's persistent and distracting. We are supposed to think about food. That's okay. We It's okay to think about food, and we can lead a very healthy life with that. We can feel hungry. That's okay. That's really normal. We're supposed to feel hungry. What we don't want is the complete absence of hunger, or the complete absence of a thought of food. So there's a balance to be had, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then okay. So if people are, maybe they've been on GLP-1s for a while and it's maybe wearing off, or they're coming down doses, and the food noise is returning, that can create quite a bit of discomfort for people. Like you said, a lot of people have invested a lot of time, a lot of energy, sometimes a lot of money into this journey. So then for the food noise to be coming back, it's quite horrible sometimes. Yeah. What do people say to you in those situations?
In those situations, it is things like feelings of failure, feelings of guilt, shame, all those emotions that were probably there beforehand for some people, which is why they may have started this journey of GLP-1. They start to come back. So, as you said right at the start, often people start these medications and not prepared for coming off them. So these thoughts and emotions were maybe never brought to the table at the start. And now people are finding that they're having to, you know, they're there. That's the thing, you see. Because once you stop, the biology it's not supporting you anymore. So therefore now people need to learn the skills to be able to navigate these emotions and thoughts. And some people, they've tried it. This is the other thing. It's not like they haven't tried it. Some people have engaged in therapy before. They may have been on various diets as well. I think that's the first thing people do try, and haven't seen any lasting results or any kind of real results that they've wanted to kind of see, if you like. But I suppose what is missing there is that normalization, as you said, the expectation setting, in order to help people to cope better and to actually realize that they've done nothing wrong by stopping, but now there's another part to this journey that requires effort, and effort being behavior, if you like, by learning those skills needed to be able to manage things like the food noise or weight creeping up. Because what I'm finding is that people that do come off them are gaining the weight back. And the evidence clearly supports this. It's not that the person themselves are doing anything wrong. It's just that the body is naturally going back to its pre-injection state, and people are gaining back, 1 to 3 stones in like 4 to 5 months. And again, it feels like a vicious cycle for some people. In which case, some people are like, nope, I'm on it for life. Even if it's at the low dose, I'm staying on it. Can't see life without it. So yeah, so there's that. I think anxiety is a big one for people, and that uncertainty, and then the feelings that come after that. Because for some people, they have to stop because it's financially not feasible.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there, like, the skills that are needed. I quite often think about, if we think about zoom into weight loss, losing weight is one set of skills. Maintaining that weight loss is a completely different set of skills. They're both very distinct journeys. They are part of the same journey, but they are distinct journeys. And there's almost preparation work to be done, I feel, in getting ready for that second stage. Now, I'm interested in these skills that you mentioned for sort of coming off and dealing with those emotions. Would you be able to share some of the skills that you're thinking about with us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in psychology or health psychology, and I in particular use like the stages of change model. You might have come across this model before, but it's basically preparing the brain. A lot of this is the person, I guess, managing those thoughts and emotions that are coming from the brain. And obviously we use our brain to learn. So it's about preparing the brain for what's to come. I often describe it to people as like when you're going on holiday, okay? Very rarely we book a holiday and we're off the next day. It's usually at least a 3 to 4, if not 6 months process between booking a holiday and going on holiday. And in that time, we often use to, like, look things up, prepare your excursions, all the prep work that we do before we get on that plane. Yeah. Similarly, for this situation, I always like my clients to be able to set a timeline. Like, when is it? What are you working towards? So we kind of sometimes even bring in the SMART goals. So really break down this goal and this journey that you're on, set the most realistic timeline. Because I think one of the skills is about setting the right expectation and time. Give yourself time is a huge one, and I think it's a lot of the time we don't do that. We want the thing done straight away. We want to see the results. We come off these injections and we want to just maintain that weight. But we know, again, from the evidence base, it doesn't work like that. So skills around planning, preparation, resources, making sure you've got what you need afterwards. So what do you need to do? Well, do it whilst you're on them is what I tend to say. Like, do the things that you wanted to do before you went on them, but it was too difficult. Try doing them now. because it creates a habit, it creates a system in the brain that then becomes familiar. So these are some of the skills in terms of being able to, manage part two, if you like. But equally, it's about being able to understand, as we said from right at the start, what are the triggers again for the food noise, like really tuning into your body and realizing which situation is creating this emotion and thought for you that then may lead to you eating when actually you're not ready to eat, or you're not actually hungry enough, or you're just eating because your mind is telling you you need to eat something.
I love that analogy of a holiday. I was thought, right, I need to get my currency, make sure all my holiday clothes are clean and ready to go and ironed. That's fantastic. But if we were to think about these skills, then if someone's on a GLP-1, and they're sort of coming to the end of using a GLP-1, then the skills that we might be thinking of might be, an exercise routine, or sometimes I like to move away from the word exercise and just say movement,
Movement,
intentional
yeah.
movement, which may not have been possible previously, or maybe thinking about meal planning or food prep, what that looks like going forward. Maybe sleep hygiene, making sure someone has a really good night's sleep and they've got everything in place for that to happen as much as possible. Um, okay, so building all these skills up whilst on GLP-1 to prepare for coming off the GLP-1 so that it's a more gentle transition. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely fair to say. And as you said as well, it's building on those lifestyle factors as well.
And you mentioned a couple of tools there. You mentioned about the behaviour change cycle. Is
Mm,
that I want to say Prochaska and de Clement?
that's right.
Yeah,
Yes.
I love
Yeah.
those names. They just stick with me. But that is,
You pronounce them very well as well.
but if someone's listening to this, they can just type into Google like stages of behaviour change, and it'll pop up with a model, and they'll see it's. I think one of the most important things about this is, it's different stages that we move through when we're trying to change our behaviour, but at the end there is a branch off, and you get sustained behaviour, or you get relapse. And relapse is a really normal part of trying to change.
Mm.
We're not, we are human. Um, I quite often tell my partner, "You're a complicated plant. Just have a drink of water." But we're human. We don't succeed all the time. We
Mm.
are meant to fail, and that is very much the human experience. I like to think about that model as a spiral. So we go round and we go round and we go round, but actually, it may feel like we're repeating ourselves. We're spiraling up because we learn something new every time. So even if it doesn't go the way that we planned, there's a gem to take away. Um,
Mm.
I don't know. Am I allowed to say that about the model?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think yeah, as you said, it's like I often say to people, it's a lapse, you've just
Mm,
lapsed, and it's a setback
mm,
because life is not a linear curve, is it
mm,
really? Life events happen, things don't go to plan. And I think as we've spoke about before, we set the bar so high that sometimes we end up falling or not doing what we set out to do because we kind of underestimated the time and the resources that we actually needed to be able to fulfill a certain goal. Um, so again, it's giving yourself, back to what I was saying earlier, it's giving yourself that time, and being kind to yourself. Because as you said, as humans, we're not machines. We do tend to have that strong negative bias. So we're very critical of ourselves rather than being kind and compassionate and forgiving for ourselves when we haven't fulfilled our goals. I mean, I often find that people are quite forgiving of others, maybe depending on who it is, of when they haven't met a goal or they haven't turned up or they've had to cancel on something. And we seem to be okay with that. It's okay, But when it's us on the other side, we tend to, sometimes I think, be quite hard on ourselves. So again, one of those, going back to the skills, is around forgiving yourself and being kind and compassionate with yourself, so that you have the energy and space to be able to restart again more positively the next day or the next week.
Absolutely. So, I mean, if I'm going to start writing down these skills here, because we've got mapping, an exercise in mapping what that journey looks like and being realistic with the expectations and the timelines as well. We've mentioned about the stages of change and just having an appreciation for that. You've mentioned about SMART goal settings as well, and then compassion. I think, it's, you were sharing that with us, and I'm nodding. I'm like, yes, compassion is so important. It's one voice for everybody else. It's a different voice for ourselves, and that voice for ourselves is usually a little bit meaner.
Mm.
So I would quite often say to my patients or my clients, the people that I'm working with, just say, hey, if your friend came to you with this problem, what would you say to them? What would you say to a loved one? What voice would you use? What words would you use? How about we use those on ourselves a little bit? And I think it's, you mentioned as well about the journey is not linear. It's not a straight
Mm.
line. It's ups and it's downs. And I think don't get me wrong, GLP-1s are amazing. But one
Mm.
of the downfalls of GLP-1s is that they make the journey feel linear.
Mm.
It is, you start a GLP-1 and it's success, 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 success. And it feels like, oh, this is a straight line. This is, and it's not real life. It's not how we're set up. It's not how the world is set up. So that when there does become that bump in the road, because there is always a bump in the road, it makes it a little bit more difficult to manage after a winning streak.
Yeah.
What, is that
Yeah,
fair, do you think?
absolutely. I think that's fair to say. And I think and that I think is where the emotional triggers, and the psychological work isn't quite there to be able to normalize that this is normal part of the process. So you've gone from that one extreme, as you said, of being on that linear curve and winning, to then feeling like it's like that boom and bust, isn't it? You've kind of like boom, 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 and then suddenly it's like, right, this is not working anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and again, we don't like that feeling of I don't like to use the word failure, but people often describe it as that feelings of that they failed again, that kind of disheartening as well. So yeah, it's I think it's like a bittersweet journey for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've mentioned a few skills here, and you've mentioned something to me previously that it's made me think of an Easter food or an Easter time food that I'm really excited to learn more about. Would you be able to share that with us, please?
Can I guess what it is? The hot
Yeah.
cross bun model.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
What is the hot cross bun model?
So the Hot Cross Bun model is originated from cognitive behavioral therapy, so CBT,
Mhm.
which again, people on the weight management journey may have had some form of CBT support, therapeutically, whether that's private or via the NHS, because it is part of the sort of weight management support psychological journey, for patients in the NHS as well. So it can be offered privately as well. So it's a great model to be able to really understand the mind body connection, because ultimately we are connected by this one nervous system. And often we probably think about things from like, usually say like the neck down and not like from the head down to the toes, because actually that is how we kind of think and feel and process information on a daily basis. So the hot cross bun model can really help people to understand that connection between the mind, the mindset, the emotions, and the physical body. Now, the hot cross bun model is shaped like a hot cross bun. So you've got the cross in the middle, the circle on the outer part of the model. And again, with the arrows that come within that cross, they can be quite interchangeable. So it's not a circular kind of model in that it just goes from thoughts, emotions, behavior. It can interact between those sort of four. So you've got thoughts, emotions, physiological sort of sensations, and behavior. So, for example, you know, you could start with thoughts that I can't do this anymore is quite an unhelpful thought, or we call it a negative automatic thought. That can trigger emotions like anxiety, frustration, sadness. And for some people, it can lead to those physical sensations. If you tune into your body when you're feeling sad or quite disappointed or angry, you're going to feel it somewhere in the body. So it's paying attention to where are you feeling that. So for some people, they might feel the sort of tightness in their neck or their shoulders or their chest. They might feel like their tummy is feeling a bit funny, like there could be butterflies going around in the tummy as well. And that is just your mind and your body talking to each other. So therefore, the mind is now kind of signaling to the body, there's something going on here, something not great. So we often call it like a threat, something dangerous is about to happen or is happening. And that leads to a behavior. So there's an action that takes place. So the action could be quite an active one, as we said right from the outset. It could be related to food. So the person might use food or even drink alcohol, what you name it, to be able to manage those unhelpful emotions and sensations. Because again, as human beings, we don't like the feeling of discomfort. And that's why change is not easy, because anytime you do something different or new, it's a change. It doesn't, we're not familiar with it. So therefore we feel quite uncomfortable with that. We don't like uncertainty. So the behavior could be that fight or flight. You either kind of stay with it, see it through, sort of ride it out if you like, or you might just completely avoid it, or you might sort of freeze, procrastinate, and engage in some form of behavior that in the long run doesn't really serve you. It's not kind of the healthy way to deal with those thoughts and emotions. Um, so that is kind of like the hot cross bun model, but equally thoughts can trigger a behavior that can trigger the physical sensation and the emotion. So it can work either way. Emotions can lead to a thought, then a behavior. So really, it's back to the individual, like what's going on with you here? Where's the trigger? What is the trigger? And working with the individual is often what I do is like psychoeducation. So really helping the person to familiarize themselves and get to know their mind and body, like by paying attention to these thoughts and emotions, and then looking at, well, what is that leading to in terms of outcome and behavior? And is that really where you want to be? And is it what you want to do? And I suppose that's where therapy comes in. And it comes in terms of building those coping skills to be able to navigate those emotions in a more sort of adaptive, healthier way.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So can I run a couple of examples past you and see if I'm understanding this correctly? Would that be okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I'm going to use myself as an example. So I get home from work in an evening and I sit down and my brain starts processing the day, and maybe I'm repeating some conversations that I've had in the workplace, or maybe I'm going through the drive home and there
Mm,
was a traffic jam and I'm like, that person cut me up. How dare they cut me up? they didn't deserve to go ahead of me, and I didn't deserve to get cut up, and there was a big queue and everything, and rah, rah, rah. So that might be a thought that I'm having to myself, and the emotion is, basically winding myself up. I'm stressing myself out. So I might notice that, I'm talking about it now, my hands are getting quite sweaty. My shoulders are rising up a little bit. And to relieve that, I could quite easily go and grab a snack. Would that sort of be an example of that model coming to life?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, it's when you think about those unpleasant situations, sometimes your brain can't distinguish between, is this happening now? Or is this already happened? So when you start to think about these things, you're kind of reliving them again. So all those sensations that you felt in that traffic jam or when you were driving home are coming back again. It's like a replay, if you like. And just by thinking about them, maybe ruminating and, just kind of like really going over them, that is still sending signals to your physical body that there's that danger again, you see? And that's why, like you said, just by talking about it, you can feel it in the body.
Yeah.
And therefore, you're trying to reach for something to either avoid that unhelpful emotion, mask it, or suppress it. Those three emotions are, or the three outcomes, if you like, is what we try to want to achieve. And sometimes we do that by using something to help us feel better again.
Yeah. And I guess that, just shining a light on it, simply being aware of it, I just said it out loud, but I would do all this in my own head. And it would go on autopilot. I wouldn't even think about it. It's just the next thing I know that I've got something to eat or got something to drink, and I'm sat there and I'm thinking, hold on, what's going on? And some people, snacking in the evening is a big part of when I'm speaking to people who are on a weight loss journey. It's that sort of the tired end of the day. We don't have as much resilience or emotional capacity. We're basically exhausted. We're ready for bed. And these things can happen automatically. And the next thing they know, they're like, hold on, why am I eating? And then the feelings of guilt and shame can creep in as well, which can sometimes amplify it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's oh well, I've started now, I might as well continue. Today's been scrapped. Let's just keep on going. And I guess that's the idea of the Hot Cross Bun model working in a different direction. Maybe, but also I guess it's the same, but it it does go
Yeah.
in different directions as
Yeah,
well.
it does. Yeah, absolutely. And you're right in terms of that mindless snacking sometimes because you are on the autopilot. And then there's the aftermath, if you like, that those feelings of guilt and shame that for some people sometimes reinforces that behavior again. Like you said, what's the point? I might as well just carry on. I ruined it, and then it amplifies and get those thoughts and emotions just get louder and louder and more intense. And you just end up in this vicious cycle again. And equally for people that are coming off the GLP-1s, they may notice these snacking patterns coming back in. And I suppose this is where, there's been quite a lot of research and focus over the years on our environment when it comes to weight management, in that the environment doesn't often help. Like, let's say you're going into the supermarket to buy, I don't know, something healthy to snack on, but then you're bombarded by the £1 aisle. And it's like, well, it's just that marketing and that temptation it's just there, and it's all colorful, isn't it, and bright, that your brain is just getting really excited by it. So there's a lot there in terms of our environment, and not just the supermarkets, but the people. Again, I find with some people, it changes their relationships. And often, and I'm sat there with people, it's like, and I'm like, oh dear, I hope this hasn't been the result of our work. But there's that realization that my partner isn't actually, helping this journey in kind of different ways, if you like. Or for some people, I find that their workplace isn't helping, in that there's that lack of support or awareness and education, and we spend most of our working or waking hours at work. So again, there's that those missing pieces there that make this journey even harder for some people, because there's that lack of social support and understanding, that makes up so much of their day, that actually for some people it's like they just feel like there's just no support.
So I guess part of the work that is really vital when thinking about reducing a GLP-1, or we notice that the effects of the GLP-1 are wearing off, part of the work is looking at the environment and, a physical place, whether it's home, whether it's the commute, whether it's the work environment, the offices, the clinic rooms, wherever it is, but also in the environment, it's who's there. So it's friends, it's family, it's colleagues. In my case, it's people on the roads. um,
Yeah.
but it's maybe thinking about how that changes on this journey as well, which I often think the conversations with people, they can sometimes be tricky.
Mm.
Have you got any sort of top tips for sort of having those conversations in a productive and positive way at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a huge piece I find, especially in certain cultures, because again, as you said, food is just we know we need to eat to live. It's a biological need, but also there's a huge cultural, social element to it as well. And in certain cultures, food brings everybody together, at weekends and, festivals and whatnot. And those festivals can come about a lot. So um, I have worked with people quite closely. They come to me, let's say, for support with weight management or emotional eating, or coming off the injections. But when you dig deeper, and this goes back to skills, is that assertiveness skills. And in the nice guidance for weight management and even behavior change, it's in there in terms of teaching people how to be assertive. And again, it's a behavior where you may have learned it, you may not have, you may have been conditioned or not. And a lot of the time, I think, even as human beings, we don't intentionally want to upset anybody. And we do care about what other people think. Although in therapy, I suppose I try to get people not to, for their own sake, and their own well-being. But it comes back to having those difficult conversations. And we can have a whole conversation, Will, around people pleasing and psychological well-being, because that is huge in this arena, I would say, as well. In that we don't often put our needs first because we feel guilty, we feel selfish. But I would argue that this is part of self-care. It's not selfish. And that communicating what you need and helping the other people or person to understand that, more the painful it is, obviously that's hard. You don't like that feelings of discomfort and pain, but you've got to, I suppose, put yourself a little bit first here, in that either which way, you're not going to feel great. Because if you don't communicate your needs and you do something to please other people, you're the one coming away feeling that unpleasant emotions and all those thoughts that might keep you awake at night. Then there's a whole that spirals into your next day. But equally, if you have that conversation in a kind of nice, polite way, you can even rehearse it or like practice it, prepare it, write it down, then have that conversation. You might, even though it's difficult, you might come away feeling like there's a solution to this problem that's more lasting and is going to serve you much better. And even though if that person does get a bit upset, well, at the end of the day, you need to think about why you're on this journey and your long-term health and well-being and mental well-being as well.
So if we think about preparing the environment for success, for the sort of the reduction in the GLP-1 medication,
Mm.
the environment, the people. So I love that idea of writing it down. Write down what you want to say, practice it, maybe practice in the mirror. Would that be
Mm.
a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. Practice it. Say it out loud because when
Yeah.
you say something out loud, it's quite therapeutic because what you're doing is you're connecting your thoughts and you're kind of connecting those emotions that go with those thoughts and you're kind of releasing them from the body. One of the other therapeutic strategy I often suggest is writing a letter. Even if you don't post it or write an email and don't send it, the therapeutic benefit of doing that is that you're releasing that tension and emotion from the body because we know from like the literature and all the research that's gone into, let's say, trauma, is that suppressing emotions just it causes more health problems. It raises that stress response and it just doesn't make you feel good. And in fact, if we link it back to earlier conversations around coping strategies and emotional eating, it can often make you do things that cost you more in the long run in terms of your health and your well-being.
Okay, okay. So the power of getting it out there, either verbalizing it, writing it down, and I guess part of changing the environment takes time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying about going planting trees and things like that, but uh,
Hmm.
having conversation with people. First of all, time to prepare that conversation, time to think about what you want to say, get it written down or say it out loud. Finding a good time to have that conversation as well, because you don't want to have a rushed conversation with someone about this, but then it might also need a follow up conversation. It might be, hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I want to change going forward. How do you feel about that?
Mm.
Maybe let's catch up in a while and, just I'd love to revisit this and see what you think if you've had a little time to think over it. That in itself is a chunk of time. And if we do that earlier on, it means that hopefully it can be easier when reducing the GLP-1 medications or the effects start to wear off. Because and I think you know when I speak to people who are using GLP-1s, people usually know they're using a GLP-1. They know that they are on a health journey or a weight loss journey.
Mm.
So having this conversation is never a surprise. People are almost expecting it. Um, so I know when people are having these types of conversations, that they often come back to me and they say, "Hey, that went better than I expected."
Mm.
I got a bit worked up about it, but actually they were kind of expecting me to have that chat with them, and it was okay. Do you ever find that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's we always maybe overthink the situation or the conversation. And again, the mind is very good at helping us do that. We often in psychology we have like a sheet of unhelpful thoughts, and I go through with sort of patients like, tell me where does this fit in? There's 15 different types of unhelpful thoughts, catastrophizing, minimizing. There's so many, black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, and sometimes these thoughts keep us stuck. They keep us stuck in terms of taking that first step, having that conversation. And as you said before, you can end up living in your thoughts for so long. You become a prison. It becomes a prison, your mind, when actually it doesn't need to be that way. And if I would say if anybody is struggling with that, it's just finding the support that you need to be able to move forwards with that, whether that's professional support or, reading around this topic to help you prepare. Um, and like you said, context is huge. I really honestly think that even when I'm delivering training sessions around these sort of topics around conversations, assertiveness, I always emphasize, even things like motivational interviewing, it's always the context counts for so much, you know, making sure the environment feels safe, that you're not in an area where people can overhear this conversation. Even at home, it's making sure that it's, you know, if you've got kids, they're in bed, or you've got, you know, parents living with you, whatever, that the space is so important. And minimal disruption, the better, because once you get into that flow of conversation, you kind of want that to continue until you feel that you've reached the point at which you feel that you've achieved everything on that list or the goals that you wanted to kind of talk about with the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's okay to go in a conversation with some notes, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
to sort
absolutely.
of say, oh, you know, this isn't like our regular conversations. I just need to have something to keep me on track here because it's a really important thing to me. And you mentioned about, you know, thoughts, feelings, emotions keeping us stuck. I thought that, you know, they can also take us back to where we used to be. If we think about the GLP-1 journey and someone's, you know, had a transformation, those thoughts and feelings can quite easily take that away and take us back, you know, the sort of the safe space or the status quo, you know, what's considered the norm. Okay, so we've mentioned food noise as something that can come back in when people are reducing GLP-1s. Is there anything else that you're sort of seeing as people reduce GLP-1s as well? Anything that people are noticing more?
So the emotions are another thing that people are noticing more, that, you know, the GLP-1 has a way of not just suppressing the hunger side of it, but it also can often quieten down that, you know, that dopamine reward system in the brain, which is what helps people in terms of managing that emotional eating or the food noise whilst they're on them. So the emotional part, so yes, you've got the food noise, but then you've also got that emotional part that actually may start to come back again, you know, um, not always necessarily linked to food, but it could be emotions on a general kind of level as well. So there is kind of that part of it as well. So the reward pathways, if you like, because that's what gets reduced, the appetite and the reward pathways as well. Um, and then, as I said earlier, that the sort of the weight gain side of it, you know, those physical changes in the body. But equally, for some people that whilst they're on them, if they've had like any health issues along the way, like gallstones, for example, and they've had to, for whatever reason, come off them, then it's an extra layer of health needs that kind of are now need to be met because as a result of being on the injection. So for some people, it could lead to some other health complication if along the way, which now is then another responsibility or something to work on afterwards as well. Um, but the mindset, I suppose that's where my focus is in terms of looking at this in terms of it's not a psychological failure. And that's the point here, is that this is just biology doing its
Yeah.
thing again. It's not that you haven't got the willpower. It's just that you probably didn't need it when you were on the injections as well. So there's that whole change in identity in that body image if the weight does return. And it feels like for some people it's like you said earlier, it's like going back in time and going back and reliving those moments or those thoughts that were there once upon a time as well.
Absolutely. It's a huge journey, isn't it? It's massive. But I think, you know, what I'm taking away from our conversation today is the fact that the mind and body are intrinsically linked. They rely on each other, they feed each other, they can't be separated, they will never be separated. and you know what's happening to one will happen to the other, and it will go in both directions. And having that viewpoint on the GLP-1 journey is vital for success, for long-term success, whether that is with GLP-1s in the short term or in the long term. You know, they really do go hand in hand. Tight grip, not letting go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experience, and your knowledge with us. If people want to come and find you, where can they find you, please, Neesha?
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. So I guess to add to mention here is that I do have a free mini guide which anybody attending can download. Um, so you can find me on my website, which is www.evokinghealth.co.uk. I'm also on Instagram at Dr_Neesha P. And the same handle for TikTok as well. Also on YouTube and LinkedIn, but all those links and handles are on my website. So I would say start with the website first.
Fantastic, fantastic, and I love your Instagram. It's
Oh, thank you.
if you've shared so many nuggets with us in this conversation, so many little gems that people hopefully that are listening can sort of pick up and take with them. There are so many more on your Instagram, and they're bite sized and they're quick and they're easy and they're relatable, and I just absolutely love it. So, thank you for your Instagram, but also thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for talking on WeChats.
Aw.
For anybody that's listening, please remember to like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Please go visit Neesha website and socials, and also don't forget to go and explore We Nutrition UK socials on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you for listening.